What's up, Taiwan? I'm Joyce coming to you from Taipei with the latest news. Taiwan needs to spend 10% of its gross domestic product on defense. That's according to U.S. President Donald Trump's nominee to become a top Pentagon policy advisor. Elbridge Colby made the comment during a grilling by U.S. lawmakers in Washington. Taiwan is already working to spend around 3% of its GDP on defense. So the question is, how much more can it afford? Jaime Ocon reports.
Security in Asia and Taiwan is a growing concern for the United States. It is in the process of confirming its team of defense policymakers. On Tuesday, Elbridge Colby, who was nominated for a leading position in the Pentagon, spoke about his concerns over Taiwan.
I've always said that Taiwan is very important to the United States, but as you said, it's not an existential interest. It's very important. The core American interest is in denying China regional hegemony. I think actually as a proportion of GDP, it's well below 3%. I agree with President Trump that they should be more like 10%, or at least something in that ballpark, really focused on their defense. So we need to properly incentivize them.
In the past few years, Taiwan has been working to increase its defense spending to arm itself and defend against threats from China, which seeks to take over the country by force if necessary. This includes billions of dollars on air defense systems, fighter jets, and various types of advanced missiles. But many in the U.S. say that Taiwan needs to move faster to address China's growing military threat. In recent months, there's also been growing concern over parts of Taiwan's defense budget being frozen or slashed by the opposition-controlled legislature.
It's disturbing to me that in recent months, the Parliament of Taiwan has moved to cut their defense budget. Are you disturbed by that move in the Taiwanese Parliament?
I'm profoundly disturbed, Senator, and I think the question that you're raising is one that I've heard not only Democrats but Republicans raise often in private. Secretary Mattis, who was mentioned earlier, said we can't care more about your defense than you can. So this is where I think I've been trying in my communication and my recommendations for policy vis-a-vis Taiwan to try to induce them in whatever way possible.
But despite these calls for Taiwan to spend 10% of GDP on defense, analysts say that number is a huge challenge. Looking at countries around the world, very few spend more than even 5% of GDP on defense. But given Taiwan's situation, analysts say Taiwan does need to raise the bar.
We've seen Taiwan increase its defense spending year on year under the last president and continuing under President Lai. And this is it's been Herculean efforts to get what looks on paper like small, half percentage points of growth. But in the grand scheme of Taiwan's national budget, those are actually pretty significant changes.
Taiwan's defense ministry told TaiwanPlus that how it spends and allocates its defense budget is based on its own assessments. Taiwan is working to increase its defense spending, with President Lai Ching-te announcing last month that the country would strive to allocate 3% of GDP on defense. The concern now, though, is the trade-off, and if defense really is the top priority compared to other necessary services and sectors in Taiwan.
Does that mean, the government decides to, reduce social services or other spending on healthcare, right? Things that really matter to Taiwan's way of life and the people of Taiwan. I just don't see it being politically viable for Taiwan to have to negotiate that social safety net that the people on Taiwan have come to really love, right?
Under U.S. pressure to boost expenditures, the decision to spend more on defense is one that only Taiwan can make. But given the changing nature of security in Asia, it's faced with a tough choice on how much priority to give to its own security. Andy Shui and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
China says it's ramping up its own defense spending by more than 7% this year. The announcement came during the two sessions, the Communist Party's most important annual meeting. Louise Watt is following the meeting from our newsroom here in Taipei. Louise, a boost this big for China's military, how will China spend that, and does that signal danger ahead for Taiwan?
Yes, well, there's some boost in defense spending of 7.2%. Actually, that was the same figure that China increased spending on its military last year as well. And it is more than the growth target for this year that they've also announced today of around 5%. So this does illustrate the importance that China is still putting on modernizing its military. Now, under Xi Jinping, since he became president in 2013, actually China has more than doubled its spending on defense to around 245 billion US dollars this year. Although, of course, that's still dwarfed by US spending on their military of around 850 billion US. But this program to modernize the Chinese military, it still has 10 years left. So China will be spending the money on developing new missiles and ships and submarines. But the work report that the Premier presented to the National People's Congress today, it again stresses that China has to be combat ready. So that will no doubt mean more exercises around Taiwan and further afield.
And Louise, what has the Chinese government said about Taiwan in their meeting so far?
Well, a lot of the same things as they've said before. The Chinese Premier Li, he said during the opening session of the National People's Congress when he delivered his work report, and again, this is to set out the Chinese leadership's priorities for the year ahead. He said that Beijing will resolutely oppose Taiwanese independence and interference by external forces. Again, these are words that we've heard time and time again. He also said, though, that Beijing will improve institutions and policies for economic and cultural exchanges between China and Taiwan. Now, we've spoken about the military. This is the softer side of the Communist Party's outreach to Taiwanese, their efforts to push this idea of reunification, as they see it, onto the Taiwanese public. So we may expect a renewed focus on inviting lower-level neighborhood officials to China for political exchanges, as well as more cultural and religious exchanges between the two sides. What's the Taiwanese government's reaction to this? Well, we're waiting to hear. We expect one of the government agencies, the Mainland Affairs Council, to comment this afternoon.
Thanks, Louise, for that update. That was Louise Watt live in Taipei. U.S. President Donald Trump is calling on Congress to scrap the CHIPS Act, a more than $52 billion US subsidy program to boost semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S.
And we're not giving them any money. Your CHIPS Act is a horrible, horrible thing. We give hundreds of billions of dollars, and it doesn't mean a thing. They take our money and they don't spend it. You should get rid of the CHIP Act, and whatever's left over, Mr. Speaker, you should use it to reduce debt or any other reason you want to.
Trump's comments come after Taiwanese chip giant TSMC announced a $100 billion US investment in its American operations. The company is already set to receive $6.6 billion in subsidies from the CHIPS Act, along with up to $5 billion in low-interest loans to build chip fabs in the state of Arizona. TSMC has declined to comment. Some of TSMC's major customers are praising the firm's massive investment in the United States. NVIDIA, AMD, and Qualcomm have all called it a win for advanced chip manufacturing in the country. Taiwan officials have also weighed in, calling it a good thing, while also stressing the country needs to maintain its overall competitiveness in chips. For more on the deal, earlier I spoke with Washington-based economics and tech analyst Ray Wang. What is your assessment of this deal? And one of the big questions here in Taiwan is how worried should people be about the country losing its competitive advantage in this sector?
TSMC done a good job in negotiating because, from TSMC's perspective, it avoid the tariff. It also help its customers to avoid the tariff. So you are basically doing a deal that avoid the geopolitical threat, while at the same time to satisfy your demand of the customers, right? But I want to be very clear here is that There's no specific timeline for this 3 more fabs and 2 packaging firms and 1 more R&D center. So this gives flexibility for TSMC to sort of like kind of manage their financial capital spending moving forward. So it's sort of like hard to quantify, like how worried people should be. But I think the key question here is like, so right now, let's forecast 10 years later, it's expected we have more advanced manufacturing in the United States. And then, that indirectly will erode Taiwan's strategic value in the event of Chinese invasion of Taiwan. But the latest deal, I think currently people are speculating because there's a new R&D center will be established in Arizona, right? So people are worried that, so you have a new process now in Taiwan, for example, let's say the A14 or A16, right? It could be deployed at the same time as Taiwan deploy A16 or A14, right? So that's the concern people have, like, right now, like Taiwan don't have that kinds of like quote unquote R&D advantage, like moving forward. But we really need to see like how TSMC plan all of this.
So it looks like TSMC's additional investment will keep going to Arizona. What do you think about that decision? I mean, it's had a tough go in its first phase of investments there. It's faced delays, labor issues.
Certainly, if you look at the P1, right, the first Arizona plant, it faced a lot of regulatory management, a lot of issues over there. We are very, very aware of that. I do think the fabs that moving forward, it will actually be easier, right? Like kind of TSMC, they can start getting familiar with the regulatory process. So that will be easier for them to navigate. And certainly the culture, it will be easier. I think the bigger concern will be the talents. There's also the upside here. Because if you have bigger expense, bigger presence of TSMC, right? It gives TSMC an opportunity to, I won't say steal, but attract the talents from firms like IBM, firms from Intel, right? Or other material firms like Applied Material, Lam Research, right? That's actually helping TSMC for their R&D or for their broader like talents pool.
Another target Taiwan has on its back with Trump is its large trade surplus. Do you think Taiwan's tactic of encouraging more investment to the U.S., now TSMC's $100 billion pledge there, is that enough? But also, when, if ever, will it be enough?
This is a good question. I think, I certainly couldn't give you the answer or make any conclusion on like whether this can satisfy Trump. But I certainly think like, it's a approach that you must take, right? You couldn't just tell Trump like, hey, like we are not going to invest anything. Eventually what you are going to get is getting tariff, right? So it's very important to show like, hey, like we would love to continue to trade with the United States, but at the same time, we would love to, making like investment after proper calculations when it comes to the business side. I'm not sure the governments have put enough effort on this because I certainly feel like, private sectors is always leading the efforts on this. The Lai administration, the current ruling government, has been very supportive to the expanding investment for Taiwanese companies in the United States. That's fine, but like, what can we really get back from U.S. governments, right? Whether it's support from military, it's support from diplomatically, or it's support economically. I think we need to be very clear on what we can get back, right? You don't want to just like give a lot of things and without getting back anything.
That was Ray Wong, an analyst of U.S.-China economics and tech competition. Kyiv is working to repair ties with Washington after U.S. President Donald Trump halted military aid to Ukraine. In a statement on X, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his team is ready to work with Trump to achieve peace and to agree to a minerals deal proposed by his administration. He also thanked the U.S. for supporting Ukraine's sovereignty during the Russian invasion and called his public clash with Trump in the Oval Office regrettable. In Jakarta, thousands of people have been forced out of their homes due to heavy flooding. Torrential rains on Monday left up to 3 meters of water in Indonesia's capital, submerging over 1,000 homes. Jakarta is regularly impacted by flooding, but these are the worst to hit the region since 2020. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. I'm Joyce. Take care and see you next time.